What if the silence you're hearing isn't emptiness, but a message louder than words? When a woman you care about starts to ignore you, it cuts deeper than most people will ever understand. It's not just about unanswered messages or canceled plans. It's the hollow space where connection used to live. It's the sting of watching someone who once lit up when you walked in, now acting like you don't exist. That silence is deafening because deep down, it awakens something primal in you. The fear of being forgotten, rejected, left behind. And that pain, it's real. It's not weakness. It's the result of having once cared deeply. But here's the truth you need to hear right now. How you respond to that silence determines who you become from this moment forward. The worst mistake you can make is chasing after someone who's walking away. When someone pulls away and your instinct is to run after them, what you're really saying is, my worth depends on your attention. But that's a lie. Your worth doesn't shrink just because someone chooses to look away. In fact, this moment, this exact silence, is a defining test, not of her loyalty, but of your strength, of your ability to stay centered when the world wants to pull you off balance. She may have stopped speaking, she may be silent, but your inner voice has to get louder, not desperate, not needy, just clear, powerful, certain. Right now, you have two paths. One leads to endless overthinking, self-blame, and trying to fix what you didn't break. The other leads to self-respect, discipline, and growth. That's the path of becoming a man who doesn't beg for attention but commands respect through presence. Because here's the secret most never learn, people only value what they feel they might lose. If you keep throwing yourself into someone's silence, you teach them they can ignore you without consequence. But if you respond with focus, elevation, and silence of your own, not out of spite, but out of power, you shift the entire dynamic. She might be ignoring you, but what matters most now is that you don't ignore yourself. You show up for yourself. You stay committed to your journey, and in doing that, you start to rise, not to prove anything to her, but to prove everything to you, because the man who grows through silence becomes the man no one can ignore. So stay with this message, because by the end, you'll understand exactly how to transform this painful silence into your greatest turning point. You'll learn how to walk with dignity, how to rewire your mind for strength, and how to carry yourself in a way that commands attention without asking for it. This isn't about revenge. It's about rebirth. It's about becoming the kind of man who doesn't just survive rejection, but uses it as fuel to rise higher. Keep watching. You're not just getting over someone. You're becoming someone. You crave her attention because somewhere inside, it feels like your worth is tied to her response. When she pulls away, it doesn't just feel like distance. It feels like rejection of your identity. You start to question everything. Was it something you said? Something you didn't do? The mind spins, and the silence becomes a mirror, reflecting all the fears you've been trying to outrun. Fear of not being enough, fear of being invisible, fear of being left behind while she moves on without looking back. These fears are powerful. And they're not just in your imagination. They come from deep emotional wiring, your earliest experiences, your sense of belonging, your desire to feel seen and chosen. But here's the truth no one talks about. Needing someone to validate you is a trap. The more you crave their attention, the more power you hand over. And when you do that, you stop being the man you were meant to be. You become smaller, quieter, less certain. You start living in reaction instead of intention. And the worst part? That desperation doesn't pull her closer, it pushes her further away. People are drawn to strength, not need. They respond to presence, not pressure. The moment you need her to see you is the moment you stop seeing yourself clearly. It's time to break that cycle. You don't need anyone to complete you. You are already whole. You just forgot it for a moment. And her silence, painful as it is a chance to remember who you are without her applause. This is your opportunity to strip away the illusion that you need to be chosen to have value. You were valuable the moment you decided to rise. You were powerful the moment you stopped chasing and started building. That's the shift. Not because you're pretending you don't care, but because you're choosing to care more about yourself. And yes, your heart may still ache. That's okay. That ache is proof that you have the capacity to feel deeply. But it's also a reminder that your emotions aren't your enemy, they're your compass. Use that pain to redirect your focus. Let it fuel your discipline. Let it sharpen your hunger. Turn the silence into structure. Turn the longing into legacy. Because when you do, something incredible happens. You become a man who doesn't beg to be seen. He becomes impossible to ignore. This isn't about becoming heartless. It's about becoming grounded, focused, relentlessly centered. When you stop needing her to give you attention, you take back every ounce of power you lost. You stop waiting for a text and start building a life. And one day, whether she looks back or not, you'll realize you didn't just survive being ignored. You rose because of it, so hold the line. Stay on the path. You're not here to chase approval, you're here to become undeniable. And that journey starts the second you stop reaching and start rising, stop chasing and start observing. That's where your strength begins. When a woman ignores you, your first impulse is to fix it, to explain yourself, to prove your worth. But real power isn't found in chasing validation. It's found in sitting with the silence and choosing not to flinch. It's in the pause between her message and your reaction. That space, right there, is where self-mastery is built. You don't need to respond. You need to watch. You need to understand. And above all, you need to regain control over the one thing that truly belongs to you, your energy. The more you chase, the more you confirm her power. The more you try to win her back, the more you tell yourself you're not enough without her. That kind of thinking destroys your frame. It makes you reactive, emotional, and easy to manipulate. But when you stop and simply observe her behavior, your thoughts, your patterns, you begin to lead yourself instead of being led. And in that space, something shifts. You begin to see things clearly. You stop overvaluing someone who doesn't see your worth. You stop giving energy to what no longer feeds your soul. Because what you tolerate is what you invite. And what you chase will always stay ahead of you. Observation gives you leverage. It gives you the ability to respond with clarity instead of emotion. That's the mindset of strength. That's the difference between a man who's lost and a man who's evolving. When you observe, you learn. When you chase, you bleed. So step back, not because you're giving up, but because you're choosing to focus on what actually matters. Yourself, your path, your discipline, your legacy. You don't win anyone back by begging. You win by becoming a version of yourself that never needed to beg in the first place. A man who observes is not cold. He's not disconnected. He's awake. He's conscious of what drains him and what builds him. He knows that not every silence needs to be filled. Not every distance needs to be closed. Sometimes the best move is no move. Sometimes the greatest respect you can show yourself is to stay silent while the world tries to shake you, because in that stillness you become unshakable. Let her wonder what changed. Let her sit with the silence you once tried to break, not out of bitterness, but out of evolution. Let her feel the absence of a man who once gave everything but now gives only to himself. That's not weakness, that's wisdom. You've spent enough time trying to be heard. Now is the time to listen to the voice inside you that's been drowned out by noise, doubt, and desperation. The voice that's telling you it's time to stop chasing approval and start living with intention. You don't need her to validate you. You need to validate the man you are becoming. Observe, reflect, rise. Self-respect is louder than any text you'll never receive. It speaks without words. It walks without chasing. It shows up in how you carry yourself when nobody's looking, especially when someone you care about starts acting like you don't matter. You feel the pull to reach out, to ask what went wrong, to remind her of who you are. But stop. You don't need to explain your worth to anyone who's chosen to forget it. Because when you act from self-respect, you shift from needing to proving. And in that shift, you reclaim everything you've been giving away. The strongest message you can send isn't a text or a phone call. It's silence paired with evolution. When you go quiet and start building, everything changes. Not because you're playing games, but because you're focused on something bigger than her response. You're focused on you. The man who places his value in someone else's hands is always at risk of being dropped. But the man who knows his value, who feels it in his actions, his discipline, and his growth, can't be shaken by distance or rejection. He's rooted. He's unmovable. That's the kind of man the world can't ignore. Right now, your emotions may be screaming for resolution. You want clarity, you want connection, but don't confuse those desires with truth. The truth is, if someone can go silent on you, if they can ignore your presence without a second thought, then they don't deserve your access, not until they earn it again. And even then, it's your choice, not theirs. Because self-respect isn't just about boundaries. It's about choosing yourself even when it hurts, especially when it hurts. Pain is temporary, dignity is permanent. When you hold the line, when you resist the urge to reach out just to feel seen, you send a message not to her but to yourself. You declare that you are no longer the man who abandons his self-worth for temporary comfort. You are no longer available to situations that dishonor your presence. That kind of power doesn't need validation. It radiates. It speaks through your eyes, your posture, your tone, your silence. That kind of power rewires your mind and commands the respect of everyone around you, not because you demanded it, but because you embodied it. She might not notice at first. That's fine. This isn't about her. This is about building a foundation so strong that no silence can shake it. You're not seeking attention. You're becoming attention. You're not waiting to be chosen. You're choosing yourself again and again. With every disciplined step forward, with every moment you decide not to chase, you grow into a version of yourself that even you didn't know existed. A version that no longer needs to be heard because he's already listening to purpose, to truth, to destiny. And that voice, that presence, that energy, it doesn't text, it doesn't chase, it leads. Every time you choose silence over reaction, discipline over impulse, you train your mind to serve you, not sabotage you. And that's what separates the powerful from the powerless. Power isn't loud. It doesn't plead. It doesn't beg to be understood. Real power is calm, certain, and composed, especially when emotions run high. When she ignores you, your mind will tempt you to break that silence. It will whisper lies. She just forgot. Maybe she's testing you. Just say something so she remembers you. But that voice doesn't want your peace. It wants your surrender. It wants you back in the cycle of seeking. And you've already outgrown that version of yourself. You're not here to be tolerated. You're not here to fight for a place in someone's life. You're here to build a life so powerful, so aligned, that anyone who looks away loses more than you do. That begins when you finally understand this. If she can ignore you, let her. Let her distance be the fuel for your fire. Let her silence be the signal to turn inward, to sharpen every part of yourself that's been softened by needing approval. Because once you see your own value clearly, you stop trying to convince others of it. You don't perform. You don't chase. You move forward. There's a level of self-respect so strong, it becomes your shield. It protects your time, your peace, your direction. And the moment you tap into that level, you become unshakable. Her actions no longer define your day. Her absence no longer creates a hole in your identity. You fill that space with growth, with purpose, with the quiet confidence of someone who knows they're enough, even when no one's watching. That's where transformation begins, not when someone finally pays attention, but when you no longer require it. You're not building this mindset for her, you're building it for the man in the mirror, the one who deserves loyalty, focus, and power, the one who's been buried under emotional noise for too long. You rise now not because someone sees your worth, but because you finally remembered it for yourself. This is your edge. This is your moment to harden your discipline and soften your need for validation. The more you lean into self-control, the more unstoppable you become. Not bitter, not numb, just clear, calm, unapologetically focused. You become the storm she thought would break you. You become the presence she can feel without speaking. Because the most dangerous man isn't the one who reacts. It's the one who evolves in silence. And when you walk in that energy, doors open. Not because you forced them, but because you outgrew the ones that were closed. You didn't lose her. You found yourself. And that version of you, he doesn't beg, he builds, he doesn't chase, he commands. Keep walking. You're not being ignored. You're being prepared for everything you were meant to become. This is your reminder that attention is not affection. Silence is not an accident. And being ignored is not something you should ever normalize. It's a signal, not a mystery. You are not confused. Your instincts are just louder now. They're telling you to wake up, to stop attaching your worth to someone's ability to respond, to finally rise above the need to be noticed. Because when you need to be seen by someone else, it means you've stopped seeing yourself. That is the root of pain, not her silence, but your disconnection from your own power. And the cure is not in her returning. The cure is in you returning to yourself. When you stop chasing what ignores you, you begin attracting what respects you. Because energy speaks louder than words. And when you stand tall in silence, when you redirect your focus back to your mission, your health, your purpose, everything changes. You become harder to shake, harder to leave behind, harder to forget. Not because you're playing a role, but because you're embodying truth. There is nothing more magnetic than a man who is grounded in who he is without needing applause for it. He does not wait to be chosen. He builds a life that cannot be overlooked. Let her walk away. Let her stay silent. Let the gap widen. Because while she disappears, you reappear. You start rebuilding the inner structure that was weakened by emotional dependence. You stop making someone else your center. And instead, you become your own gravity. That shift isn't easy. It demands discipline. It demands that you sit with the discomfort of being unseen and not use it as a reason to abandon yourself. But once you get through it, you gain something unshakable, certainty. Not in her return, but in your own evolution. This isn't about becoming numb. It's about becoming aware. When you're aware, you stop taking disrespect personally. You stop internalizing someone else's behavior as a reflection of your value. You see it for what it is, a reflection of their priorities, their clarity, their capacity. And that frees you, because now you're no longer waiting for them to wake up. You're wide awake. And with that awareness, you no longer beg to be seen. You become the one who sees, the one who leads, the one who builds in silence and shows the world what real strength looks like. The goal is not revenge. The goal is release, not to punish your absence, but to purify your presence. Because when you let go of who isn't choosing you, you make room for everything that will. You shift from needing closure to creating purpose. You stop rehearsing conversations and start designing a future, one where you are the source, not the seeker. And in that world, silence is no longer painful. It becomes sacred. It becomes a forge. And from it, you don't come out the same. You come out unbreakable. Keep building. Keep rising. Keep becoming. The world doesn't need your reaction. It needs your transformation. Letting go isn't weakness, it's wisdom. It's knowing that not everything lost is a loss. That sometimes the greatest act of strength is the refusal to hold on to what holds you back. When someone ignores you, it's easy to make it about you, to search for flaws, to wonder what you did wrong. But that mindset traps you. It keeps you spinning in a story that says you're not enough. The truth is, her silence may have nothing to do with your worth, and everything to do with your path. You weren't meant to shrink yourself just to keep someone's attention. You were meant to expand so far that indifference can't reach you. You've spent enough time waiting, enough time second-guessing your value. Now it's time to break the cycle of emotional dependence, to stop tying your happiness to someone else's response. Because the longer you wait to be chosen, the longer you delay your own becoming. You are not here to be on standby. You are not here to dim your light just to make someone else comfortable. If she can't see your value, let her go blind. You're not walking away because you're angry. You're walking away because you finally remember who you are. Growth doesn't scream. It doesn't chase. It outgrows. And that's exactly what's happening. You are outgrowing conversations that never start, outgrowing the need for approval, outgrowing the pain of being ignored. Because when you rise above it, you realize this isn't rejection, it's redirection. And that shift in perspective gives you the power to stop reacting and start leading your energy, your time, your mission. You don't need closure when you're already moving forward. You don't need validation when you know your worth is not up for negotiation. Silence can be painful, but it's also a teacher. It reveals what you tolerate. It exposes your triggers, and if you're willing to face it, it shows you where you've abandoned yourself in the pursuit of being loved. Now is the time to reverse that, to show up for yourself louder than ever, to become so aligned with your values that the wrong people feel your absence and the right ones respect your presence. You don't chase, you don't explain, you evolve quietly, steadily, relentlessly. The power is not in her return. It's in your refusal to collapse when she walks away. It's in your decision to build in silence, to turn every unanswered message into fuel, and to stand so firmly in your purpose that no one's attention can shake you again. Because the man who doesn't need to be seen to know his worth becomes impossible to overlook. He stops being an option. He becomes a standard. And that shift, that's the moment everything begins to change. Not because she came back, but because you never left yourself again. Keep going. Your silence is no longer a void. It's a vow to never abandon the man you're becoming. Every time you hold your ground, you reinforce the message that you are no longer a prisoner of someone else's approval. You are no longer chasing moments, begging for attention, or shrinking your power just to keep someone around. You've stepped into something greater now, self-command. And in that space, peace becomes your standard, not chaos. You no longer ask, why is she ignoring me? Instead, you ask, Why would I allow myself to wait on someone who doesn't see me? That question shifts everything. It cuts through illusion. It destroys fantasy. It wakes you up to the reality that your life is too important to be paused for someone else's confusion. Let her confusion remain hers. You are clear now. Clear on who you are. Clear on what you deserve. And clear on the energy you're no longer willing to entertain. Because the longer you wait for someone to return, the more of yourself you give away without return. That kind of debt builds silently. It doesn't just take your time, it takes your spirit, your joy, your focus. But the moment you stop handing out chances to people who choose distance, you begin collecting pieces of yourself you didn't even know you lost. Respect is not optional. Connection is not one-sided. You don't keep showing up for someone who keeps disappearing. You don't keep loving from empty. You fill your life with so much purpose, so much direction, that absence no longer hurts. It teaches. It teaches you to trust yourself, to trust that walking away isn't weakness, it's strength in motion. Because you are not walking away from her. You are walking toward peace, toward clarity, toward a version of yourself who no longer needs to be rescued from loneliness, because he knows how to stand in solitude and still feel whole. You're not seeking revenge. You're not trying to win. You're just done participating in cycles that make you question your worth. When you finally draw that line, when you stop reaching, stop explaining, stop hoping, you create space for everything you were missing. Not from her, but from within. Self-belief, emotional freedom, mental sharpness. You gain the parts of you that were buried under every unanswered message and ignored call. And once you have those back, you're no longer waiting. You're building, focused, driven, untouchable. She may notice, she may not. It doesn't matter, because your growth isn't for show. It's for survival. It's for evolution. The man who doesn't flinch when he's ignored, who doesn't spiral when he's left behind, is the man who's built himself from within. And that man, he becomes impossible to manipulate. He stops playing the game and starts mastering his life. Stay in that lane, hold that standard. Your silence isn't empty, it's full of purpose. It's the foundation of a man who will never again beg to be seen because he finally sees himself, completely, unapologetically, powerfully. Keep rising. You're just getting started. The most powerful version of you will not emerge from comfort. He will rise from the moment you no longer tolerate being half seen, half loved, or half prioritized. Ignored? Let it sharpen you. Let it teach you that the world doesn't owe you clarity, and people don't owe you consistency. But you owe yourself everything. You owe yourself discipline, dignity, and direction. No one else will give that to you. And if someone's silence leaves you feeling invisible, it's time to realize you've outgrown trying to be seen by the wrong eyes. Because someone who truly values you does not ignore your presence, they protect it. You have spent too long hoping that maybe, just maybe, she would realize your worth if you stayed patient, loyal, or understanding. But hoping doesn't heal. It holds you hostage. It keeps you stuck in patterns that do nothing but drain your potential. There comes a time when your soul gets tired of waiting, tired of asking, tired of lowering its volume just to be heard. That moment is now. You do not rise by being more patient with neglect. You rise by recognizing when something isn't love. It's avoidance wrapped in silence. And you deserve more than that. You were not created to beg for connection. You were created to embody it. When you stop accepting breadcrumbs, you stop starving. When you stop knocking on closed doors, you stop bleeding energy. And that energy? That's what you need now more than ever. Not to win someone back, but to reclaim the pieces of yourself you handed over without question. Pull them back, not out of spite, but out of deep respect. Because the longer you settle for being an option, the longer you postpone becoming the priority in your own life. No more waiting, no more wondering, no more wasting your strength trying to prove you're worth someone's time. You are, but your value is not up for discussion. It's not determined by their silence. It's proven by how you respond to it. You don't respond with anger. You don't lash out or collapse. You go inward. You build. You transform. You become so focused on becoming unshakable that the noise outside can't reach you anymore. Not because you've gone cold, but because you've gone clear. You've drawn a line between who you were and who you're becoming. And there's no going back. The man who once chased is gone. The man who once waited is done. What remains is presence, power, peace. You feel it now. The shift, the quiet, the stillness. It's not empty, it's preparation. It's the sound of the ground hardening beneath your feet. You are no longer asking what she thinks of you. You are asking what you will build with the freedom her silence has given you. That's the question that matters now. And the answer? It begins with every action you take from this moment forward. Keep walking, keep evolving. Your power is no longer potential. It's becoming permanent. There is a version of you that doesn't chase, doesn't beg, doesn't shrink. He doesn't get thrown off by silence because he knows his energy is a gift, not a request. He's not desperate to be chosen. He's focused on becoming someone who commands his time, controls his emotions, and creates his own value, day after day. When someone ignores him, it doesn't shake him. It clarifies his focus, because he's no longer playing a role in someone else's story. He's writing his own. With discipline, with power, with purpose. That's the energy you're stepping into right now. Not because you want to show her anything, but because you're tired of forgetting your own worth. When you stop outsourcing your confidence to someone else's attention, you begin to realize that rejection can't touch a man who's rooted in his own identity. Her silence might sting, but it doesn't define you. What defines you is what you do next, how you carry yourself when no one's watching, how you show up when you feel invisible, how you speak to yourself when everything feels quiet. That's where real confidence is born. Not in the spotlight, but in the shadows. When you choose to keep rising even when no one's clapping, that's power, that's presence. That's the beginning of a man who's done living for temporary affection. You don't need to respond to the silence. You need to respond to your mission. Every second you spend overthinking her lack of interest is a second stolen from your growth. And your growth? That's not something to delay. That's your responsibility. That's your life calling you forward. You were never meant to stay stuck in emotional limbo. You were meant to lead, to create, to build a reality so solid that no woman's distance can pull you off course. That happens when you turn your attention inward, when you pour your energy into purpose instead of pain, when you choose forward over feedback, progress over validation. You are not behind, you are not broken, you are simply waking up to the truth that you were never supposed to fight for someone's attention. You were supposed to master your own. The world doesn't reward neediness. It responds to certainty. Not arrogance, certainty. The kind that comes from knowing you are enough without needing to be reminded. That's the man people respect. That's the man women remember. Not the one who pleads for love, but the one who embodies it. Fully, fearlessly, unapologetically. You don't win by proving anything. You win by improving everything, your habits, your mindset, your circle, your standards. You win when you stop playing emotional games and start living with unshakable intent. Let her silence be the moment you drew the line and said, no more. No more waiting, no more doubting, no more giving yourself away in pieces. From this moment forward, you are whole, you are moving, you are rising, and nothing, not even silence, can stop you now. Every time you let go of someone who doesn't see your value, you step closer to the man you're meant to become. Not the man who waits around hoping for approval, not the one who twists himself into someone he's not just to be noticed. You become the man who moves with quiet confidence, who doesn't flinch when he's overlooked, because he knows exactly what he brings to the table. He doesn't chase closure, he becomes it. That's the power of detachment, not from life, not from love, but from the need to be chosen by someone who hesitates. Because when someone ignores you, what they're really saying is they don't know how to hold what you offer. And that's not your burden to carry. Real strength is built in these moments. Not when things are clear, but when they're not. When silence stretches longer than you expected, and you feel the pull to break your own standards just to feel something again. But that feeling? It's false comfort. It promises relief, but delivers regret. You've been down that road, you've sent that text, you've opened that door again, and every time you were left emptier. So this time, you choose differently. You sit with the discomfort. You breathe through it. You remind yourself that not every ending deserves a reopening. Some things fall apart so you can finally rise without dead weight holding you back. You're not heartless for walking away. You're not cold for choosing peace. You're wise. You've learned. And now you move with a higher standard, not just for others, but for yourself. Because what you allow reflects how you see yourself. And the man who keeps letting himself be treated like an option will never become the one who leads his life with purpose. That shift begins now, not by blaming, not by trying to teach her a lesson, but by teaching yourself discipline. The kind that keeps you from slipping back into patterns that have never served you. The kind that reminds you, If someone can ignore you, they're not aligned with the life you're building. You weren't born to beg for connection. You were built to create impact. And impact doesn't require everyone to understand you. It requires you to understand yourself so deeply that other people's confusion can no longer distract you. That's the level of control you must aim for. Emotional discipline, mental focus, inner peace. Because when those become your priorities, you stop giving energy to what drains you. You stop handing your power to those who don't know what to do with it. And you begin pouring that power into purpose, vision, and the quiet mastery of your own potential. She may circle back. She may not. That's irrelevant now. What matters is how far you're willing to rise when no one's watching. This isn't about getting her attention. It's about earning your own, standing fully in your strength, living by your code, and finally realizing you never needed her to validate your worth. You just needed to stop forgetting it. You become dangerous the moment you stop reacting. When you stop reaching out for answers, stop waiting for closure, stop obsessing over what she's thinking, you take back everything you were giving away. Not just your attention, but your energy, your focus, your identity. When you stop letting her silence define your worth, you become untouchable. Not because you don't feel, but because you've finally learned that your feelings don't need to be validated by someone else's response. That's maturity. That's strength. That's the start of emotional freedom. And freedom is the real win, because when you stop depending on anyone to rescue you from the confusion, you step fully into your own clarity. The man who stands still in his own presence, unfazed by distance, unmoved by mixed signals, that's the man who commands respect, not just from others, but from himself. And that self-respect, it becomes a shield against insecurity, against desperation, against the temptation to break your own standards for temporary relief. Because nothing feels worse than abandoning yourself just to feel seen. You've done that. You've overextended. You've explained. You've justified. And none of it changed a thing. Because people don't see you more clearly when you over-explain. They see you more clearly when you stop needing to. This is the pivot point, the mental shift where you decide you're no longer going to chase understanding from someone who's already decided to disconnect. You're not doing it out of ego. You're doing it out of evolution. Because your time is your life. And every second you spend wondering what went wrong is a second you could have used to build what's right. You could have read. You could have trained. You could have worked. You could have grown. That's the cost of emotional dependence. It robs you of your future to keep you stuck in your past. But you're done paying that price. Because you've realized the truth. People's silence has nothing to do with your value and everything to do with their capacity. Some people simply aren't capable of showing up. And that's not your job to fix. Your job is to rise, to redirect your mind toward purpose, to pull your heart out of situations that keep it fragmented. This isn't about being cold. It's about being clear. You've cried, you've questioned, you've waited, but now you move quietly, powerfully, with zero need for applause, because you don't need anyone to clap for you. You just need to stop clinging to people who confuse your spirit. You are not hard to love. You are just trying to be loved by someone who doesn't know how to recognize strength when it stands in front of them. Let her go. Not with bitterness, but with gratitude. She gave you the silence that finally made you listen to yourself. That voice inside, the one telling you it's time to lead, time to heal, time to grow. It's louder now. Honor it. Follow it. Become the man who no longer waits to be chosen. Become the man who chooses himself. Every day, without hesitation, without regret. When you choose yourself without apology, you break a cycle that's been running you in circles. You stop looking for proof that you're enough. You stop handing out pieces of yourself to people who treat your presence like an afterthought. You stop waiting for the text, the explanation, the chance to make things right. Because something deeper inside you finally wakes up. A fire that's not fueled by her attention, but by your own direction. A fire that says, I don't chase energy that confuses me. I align with energy that respects me. That's not arrogance. That's clarity. That's maturity. That's what happens when you've been overlooked enough times to realize that being seen starts from within. There's a calm that comes when you stop fighting to be understood. You don't need to explain your silence. You don't need to prove your loyalty. You just live in a way that reflects your standards. You carry yourself like a man who knows what he brings to the table. And because of that, you stop begging to be invited to places where respect is optional. This isn't about acting like you don't care. It's about not letting someone else's indecision shrink you. You rise not because she walked away, but because you finally stopped waiting for her to turn around. And in that decision, everything changes. You take your power back. You hold it like a weapon of peace, because now your actions are built on intention, not reaction. You become hard to manipulate, hard to distract, hard to throw off course, not because you've shut down emotionally, but because you've built boundaries around your purpose. Boundaries that protect your time, your focus, your peace, and the more you protect them, the more you start to attract different energy. People who see your value without needing to be convinced, people who feel your presence without needing to be chased. But that only comes after you stop giving energy to what's already shown you it doesn't serve your future. Healing isn't about getting even, it's about getting aligned with your mission, with your standards, with your identity. Because when you know who you are, silence doesn't shake you, mixed signals don't distract you. You stop wondering what went wrong and start building what feels right. You start showing up with confidence, not craving, with vision, not validation, and the world begins to respond differently. Not because they changed, but because you did. Let that be your power. Let that be your peace. You don't need to play games to get someone's attention. You don't need to dim your light hoping they'll finally see you. The right people see you clearly the first time. The wrong ones never will, no matter how loud you shout. So go silent, not out of spite, but out of strength. Let your growth speak for itself. Let your focus become the message. And remember, the man who stays rooted in his purpose never needs to prove his worth. He simply lives it every day, relentlessly. When you stop proving yourself to people who stop choosing you, something powerful happens. You begin to reclaim the pieces of your soul you once scattered for approval. You no longer feel the need to beg for attention because your identity no longer depends on it. You realize the person you were chasing isn't a source of love, but a mirror reflecting what you thought you lacked. That mirror breaks when you stand in your truth. And in that silence, you meet yourself again, not the version shaped by disappointment, but the one built on purpose. That's where strength is born. Not from getting what you thought you needed, but from finally seeing that you never needed it at all. This is where your standards rise, where you no longer accept crumbs just because you're starving for connection, where you stop making excuses for people who only show up halfway. You stop waiting for love to come in the form of inconsistency and confusion. You stop mistaking absence for mystery and silence for depth. Because now you know the difference between someone who's emotionally unavailable and someone who's genuinely interested. You've learned to trust patterns, not potential. And that saves you from drowning in illusions. You're no longer seduced by the highs and lows of inconsistent affection. You want steady, you want truth, and most of all, you want peace, not performance, not emotional games. Just peace. Peace doesn't come from getting closure. It comes from giving it to yourself. From saying, this ends here. Not because I don't care, but because I care too much to stay stuck. You walk away not in anger, but in wisdom, because you finally understand that people treat you the way you allow. And if you keep returning to confusion, you're telling the world that chaos is your comfort zone, but it's not. You've outgrown that. You've outgrown being the one who always initiates, who always overextends, who always carries the weight of communication on their shoulders. That version of you existed when you didn't know your worth. Now you do. And now, you act like it. Your silence is no longer a weakness. It's a boundary. Your stillness is no longer passivity. It's power. Because when you're no longer reactive, you're finally intentional. You respond with clarity, not emotion. You choose peace over panic. And that changes everything. That makes you magnetic. Not to everyone, but to the right ones. To those who recognize consistency. Who don't see your standards as a threat, but as a reflection of value. And you'll know who they are, not by what they say, but by how they show up. Because the right energy doesn't keep you guessing. You've been waiting for someone to see you, to really see you. But now, you see yourself. And that's what shifts your world. Because the man who knows his value doesn't seek permission to be powerful. He just is. Quietly, boldly, completely. And nothing is more attractive than a man who walks like he finally remembers who he is. When you carry yourself like a man who needs no validation, the world starts to notice. Not because you're louder, but because you're clearer. Not because you seek attention, but because you radiate intention. That shift is everything. It's the difference between chasing and attracting. between being pulled in every direction and moving with quiet, focused strength. You stop reacting to silence. You stop questioning your worth based on someone else's inconsistency, because you've come to realize your peace isn't up for negotiation. It's your foundation. And once you build on that, no one's absence can shake it. You begin to see the power of walking away, not as a weakness, but as a statement. A declaration that says, I'm not available for anything that costs me my dignity. You don't slam doors. You don't raise your voice. You simply close the chapter with grace, knowing that not everyone who enters your life deserves a permanent role. And that's not bitterness. That's clarity. That's maturity. That's the strength of a man who finally understands that being chosen isn't the goal. Being respected is. And if that's not being offered, you step back, not out of spite, but out of self-respect. Your presence becomes powerful when it's no longer desperate, when it's rooted in purpose, not performance. You stop explaining yourself to people who are committed to misunderstanding you. You stop trying to be seen by those who only look when it's convenient. Instead, you invest in the spaces that reflect your energy, that mirror your value, that challenge you to rise, not shrink. And suddenly, the silence that once haunted you becomes your ally. It teaches you to listen, to observe, to trust, to grow, to align with what feels right, not what feels familiar. Letting go doesn't mean you're giving up. It means you've chosen to give back to yourself. All the love you poured into someone who didn't know what to do with it. All the time you spent decoding mixed signals. All the energy you wasted trying to prove you were enough. You take it all back and you reinvest it into your own evolution, into your goals, into your health, into your mind, into the people who actually show up. And in doing so, you become undeniable. Not because you're trying to be, but because you're no longer distracted by what isn't aligned. Every time you choose peace over drama, focus over noise, purpose over validation, you win. Not the kind of win that needs to be announced, but the quiet, powerful kind. The one that builds momentum. The one that sharpens your vision. The one that brings people into your life who see you without effort, who respect you without needing a reason, who value you without conditions. That's what happens when you stop chasing what isn't yours. You make space for what's meant to stay. And that space, filled with peace, power, and purpose, is where your transformation begins. When you stop chasing someone who doesn't appreciate your presence, you start reclaiming the parts of yourself you gave away too easily. The more you pull your energy back, the clearer you see who truly deserves it. There is a freedom that comes when you stop negotiating your worth. You no longer wait for validation from someone who withheld it as a form of power. You no longer measure your value based on someone else's confusion. You let go, not to prove a point, but to find your balance again. Because nothing is more powerful than a man who realizes his peace is more important than being understood by someone who refuses to listen. Strength isn't loud, it's steady. It doesn't need to convince anyone. It simply exists. You walk different when you know what you bring. You speak different when you're no longer hoping to be chosen. You carry yourself with calm assurance. Because you've stopped giving energy to what drains you. You've stopped expecting someone to meet you halfway when they won't even leave their comfort zone. That clarity protects you. It shields your mind from cycles that once broke you. You no longer entertain the patterns that kept you stuck in emotional limbo. You see them for what they are, tests. And this time you pass them by not reacting, by not engaging, by choosing yourself in silence. The most dangerous version of a man is the one who no longer needs to prove anything. He's no longer driven by ego or desperation. He's led by purpose. He doesn't chase, he attracts. He doesn't beg, he builds. He doesn't get lost in confusion. He creates direction. Because his energy is no longer spread thin, trying to win over someone who isn't ready. His focus is precise, and his presence becomes rare. And what is rare becomes valuable. That's how you regain your power. Not by demanding respect, but by becoming someone whose respect is earned. It's not about pretending you don't care. It's about genuinely caring more about your own peace than someone else's approval. You learn to sit with the silence and use it to grow, to get stronger, to upgrade mentally, emotionally, physically. You replace obsession with discipline. You replace doubt with faith. You replace waiting with building. And before long, you look in the mirror and realize you're not the same. You've outgrown the version of yourself that used to accept less than he deserved. You've evolved into someone who moves with intention, who chooses connections that reciprocate, not just consume. Because at the end of the day, attention fades, games get old, but purpose builds legacy. A man rooted in his purpose doesn't crumble when ignored. He rises, he refocuses, he rebuilds. And in doing so, he becomes the version of himself he was always meant to be. Not for her, not for anyone else, but for himself. That's the power of letting go. Not to be cold, but to grow. Not to forget, but to remember who you really are. You don't grow by forcing things to work. You grow by walking away from what doesn't. When you stop trying to convince someone of your worth, you give yourself space to become someone who doesn't need to. That space is where your power lives. It's where you stop being reactive and start being intentional. You begin to notice how much of your energy was being drained by trying to hold together something that was never aligned with your path. You realize that the silence you feared is actually your sanctuary. It teaches you that peace is not found in being seen. It's found in seeing yourself clearly, maybe for the first time in a long time. When someone ignores you, it triggers your insecurities. It whispers lies that you're not enough, that something's wrong with you. But that voice isn't truth. It's the echo of unhealed wounds. And wounds don't get better by chasing people who cause them. They heal when you stop seeking external validation and start feeding your own spirit. You look inward. You build quietly. You sharpen your mind. You strengthen your body. You realign your goals. That shift is not loud, but it's powerful. It tells the world that your value doesn't fluctuate based on who stays or who walks away. It's fixed because it comes from within. Every time you choose silence over reaction, presence over pursuit, and self-respect over desperation, you create a new standard for your life. You train yourself to become the man who doesn't break when someone pulls away. You train yourself to stay grounded, composed, and clear-headed. You begin to attract differently, not because you're playing games, but because you're becoming whole. A whole man isn't desperate for connection. He welcomes it, but he never chases it. He invites others into his world, but he doesn't shrink himself to fit into theirs. The energy you used to waste wondering why she isn't responding, what you did wrong, or how to fix it, that energy is yours to reclaim. That focus belongs on your mission, your growth, your evolution. Because the real prize isn't her attention, it's your transformation. And when you begin to operate from that mindset, everything changes. You stop trying to be chosen and start choosing yourself every single day. You stop lowering your standards just to feel accepted. You raise them and trust that what's meant for you won't need to be chased. It will recognize your value and align effortlessly. This is what strength looks like. Not emotional numbness, but emotional maturity. Not ego, but confidence. Not games, but grounded presence. You don't need to act indifferent to protect your pride. You just need to be deeply committed to protecting your peace. The right people will respect it. The wrong ones will be confused by it. Either way, you win. Because a man who stands rooted in his worth no longer fears silence. He embraces it because he knows that in that silence he's becoming someone unstoppable.